When Margaret Ellis turned 70, she found herself staring at a quiet house in suburban Ohio. Her husband, John, had passed away 5 years earlier. Her 3 children had grown up, scattered across the country with families of their own, and while they visited occasionally, most of her days were spent in silence. Margaret loved her home, filled with decades of memories, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The walls echoed back her loneliness. One Sunday morning, while sipping her tea, Margaret recalled a conversation she once had with her mother years ago. Her mother had said, "When you grow older, who you live with matters more than where you live." At the time, Margaret hadn't thought much of it, but now, facing her 70s, she realized how true those words were. Margaret began reaching out to her friends, neighbors, and even a few acquaintances from her church group. She asked them about their living situations, what they liked, what they struggled with, and what they would recommend for someone like her who is still active but wanted companionship. What she discovered was profound, and it changed the way she thought about aging. Through her journey, Margaret met other wise elders who shared their stories and offered advice. From their experiences, she learned the 5 best types of people to live with after turning 70. The comfort of living with family. Margaret first visited her old friend, Linda Parker, who lived with her daughter in Denver, Colorado. Linda was 72, sprightly, and always had a smile on her face. "I wasn't sure about moving in with my daughter at first," Linda admitted as she poured Margaret a cup of coffee. "I worried I'd be a burden. But my daughter insisted it would be good for all of us. I help with the grandkids, she helps me with appointments, and we share meals together. The best part is I never feel alone." Margaret watched how Linda's grandson ran up to her, hugging her tightly. The warmth in the house was undeniable. Living with family meant love, security, and constant interaction. Of course, it came with challenges, like respecting boundaries and giving each other space, but the benefits outweighed the drawbacks. The joy of living with a close friend. In Arizona, Margaret reconnected with her childhood best friend, Evelyn Carter. They had once promised each other that if they were ever widowed or alone in old age, they'd move in together. True to her word, Evelyn had invited her widowed cousin, Susan, to share her home. "It's like college all over again," Evelyn said with a laugh. "We cook together, watch TV, argue about silly things, and then make up. Having a friend under the same roof gives me a reason to smile every morning." Margaret saw the sparkle in Evelyn's eyes. Living with a close friend brought joy and companionship. It wasn't about dependency, but about choosing someone who shared similar values and humor. The security of living with a trusted neighbor. Back in her own town, Margaret spoke with George Wilson, a 78-year-old veteran. George had lived alone for years but recently invited his longtime neighbor, Paul, to move in. "Paul isn't family, but he's like a brother to me," George explained. "We watch out for each other. If one of us doesn't come down for breakfast, the other knows something's wrong. It's a kind of safety net." Margaret noticed how relaxed George was, and she realized that living with a trusted neighbor could mean peace of mind. Someone nearby to check in, share meals, and provide companionship could make all the difference. The warmth of living with adult grandchildren. Margaret's cousin, Diane, offered another perspective. Diane, 75, lived with her granddaughter Emily, a 26-year-old nurse in Texas. "At first, I worried she'd lose her freedom by living with me," Diane confessed. "But Emily told me she wanted me here. She says I remind her of her childhood and give her comfort after long shifts. In return, she helps me with errands and makes sure I'm healthy." Margaret saw how the two of them shared a bond that bridged generations. Diane was surrounded by youthful energy, and Emily received the love and wisdom only a grandmother could give. The inspiration of living in a senior community. Finally, Margaret visited her neighbor, Charles Henderson, who had recently moved into a senior living community. At 79, Charles had decided that being surrounded by people his own age gave him the most fulfillment. "You know what I love about this place?" Charles said with a grin. "There's always someone to play cards with, join for a walk, or sit and chat with. I never have to eat alone unless I want to." It feels like one big family, and the staff makes life so much easier. Margaret saw how vibrant Charles seemed compared to when he had lived alone. The laughter, the activities, and the friendships had revived his spirit. Margaret's decision. After months of visiting and listening to these wise elders, Margaret returned home with a heart full of wisdom. Each option had its own beauty, and the answer wasn't about which was best, but which was right for her. She thought long and hard. Living with her daughter meant family love. Living with a friend meant joy and laughter. Living with a neighbor meant security. Living with grandchildren meant a bridge between generations. And living in a senior community meant endless companionship. In the end, Margaret chose to move in with her daughter, Anna, in Boston. It felt right for her heart. She knew it wouldn't always be easy, but she believed her mother's words more than ever. Who you live with matters more than where you live. And so, at 70, Margaret stepped into a new chapter of life, not one of loneliness, but one filled with love, laughter, and shared moments. Her story became a reminder to everyone that aging doesn't mean the end of happiness. It simply means choosing wisely who you surround yourself with, because after 70, companionship and connection are the greatest treasures of all.